The purpose of this last session is to just a free Q&A session. You can also, of course, give us some feedback of the Hackfest and ask directly to the responsible of each session or module to answer some technical gaps that you may have.
So I see there was just a question there in terms of OSM Onboarding Certification Program for vendors. Was that in reference to the VNF Onboarding Lab? Did you discuss that, the whole VNF onboarding ecosystem?
No. But I think that we can connect both topics. There is no certification, at least provided by OSM, by its OSM today. But we have a group inside OSM called the BNF Onboarding Task Force, which is responsible of, for example, this kind of documentation, and in general ensuring that BNF vendors have everything they need to build their packages with OSM to help the ecosystem of onboarded BNFs in OSM grow, and with the mission of caring about the complete onboarding process, not only describing in a basic way these functions, but building BNF packages or helping the vendors build BNF packages that can be unique and reused across all their customers in the same way, leveraging all the features of open source MANO related to the abstraction of the infrastructure and the automation that they can get of all the operations. So that group offers a sandbox that can be used to onboard BNF. So if you are a BNF vendor or you are working with a BNF vendor and want to onboard, build packages, complete packages with all the automation embedded, want to onboard this package, you get a tenant in this specific bin where we have been working on, and an open source MANO instance, and of course the help of this group to achieve this onboarding. So you can contact us. We have a Slack channel, or we have also a mailing list that you can contact for getting access to this sandbox. But no certification program. Not sure if I think, Sylvia, you have received this request in the past, and maybe can give the Etsy position about that.
Thanks, Gianpietro. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So no, I don't think it's something we have in our plans in the immediate future. Yeah, as you said, right now we are taking onboarding VNFs through the VNF Onboarding Task Force and maintaining a list of compatible VNF providers in the OSM ecosystem. That's as far as we go. Yeah, of course, there's some kind of self-certification driven by the VNF Onboarding Task Force, but I think that's the progress there is made by the VNF providers themselves, right?
I'll point out though, Sylvia, because there's another event coming up in a couple weeks known as the Plug Test. And while it's not certification, maybe you want to give us a 2-minute overview of what plug tests can help with.
So that's very nice of you, Mark. Yeah, my second hat at Etsy is dealing with NFV interoperability, and as such, we are currently preparing for the 5th NFV plug test event. And there we welcome any NFV implementation, not necessarily in the OSM ecosystem. We have up to, I think right now, 10 different orchestrators participating. 3 of them are OSM distributions, but we have also proprietary orchestrators and one on-app distribution. And there we welcome as well a wide range of VNFs wide range of platforms, OpenStack-based or Kubernetes-based. And well, that is not a certification program either. There's a number of standardized testing that is run with different combinations of all those components. So again, it's we don't certify the participation or the products that are participating, but we kind of acknowledge and promote the companies and the implementations that join that activity and that volunteer to go through that multi-vendor interoperability testing. And in that activity, there's also some aspects related to NFV API conformance, where the vendors can assess the level of compliance to NFV APIs, their implementations. So it's a very good playground to come and test compatibility with different orchestrators, including OSM.
Okay, I'm just sort of looking. I see we're starting to get our questions coming in, and oh, there we go. Gianpietro is displaying the full pictures. So, who wants to do the sort of official? Here we are. Ask us the questions. Kickoff. Was that you, Gianpietro, or Sylvia? Are you wanting to do that, or?
I can do if you want. So you
Sure.
can see, I think this is a compilation of some images that you've seen in the, hopefully you've seen in the very first video, the introduction to NFV and OSM. So this is a compilation of pictures of our technical steering committee members and our different module leaders and technical task force leaders. Okay, so here, I hope most of them are in this call. The list of participants is very, very long, so I cannot go through them, but you should have among the audience Gerardo from Telefónica, Mark Shuttleworth from Canonical, Jose Miguel Guzman, who's TSC leader working for Whitestack, Felipe Vicens from Atos, Francisco Rodriguez from Indra, and our module leaders are Mark from Canonical, David from Canonical as well, Alfonso from Telefónica, Subankar from Altran, and Gianpietro, who's leading the BNF Onboarding Task Force.
Gianpietro, you don't have a name up on your screen there.
No.
Sorry about that. I made up this slide very, very quickly 3 minutes ago.
Bob is behind my picture.
They all know him by now.
It's great, Silvia. Everybody knows you, Gianpietro. Don't worry.
So I'm not sure who would like to help facilitate in terms of the questions, but I see there have been questions asked in the channel already. There is one that was from earlier today that I said would be good to have in the Q&A. Unfortunately, due to whatever go-to-meeting issues I keep on having, I've lost the chat history. So before I forget so before I forget the question, I'd like to pose it right now. I believe it was from Julian, and it was about, is there licensing or like Apache style licensing or closed licensing around VNFs or VNFDs? And the way I see it is those are two separate categories. One is what's deployed under the infrastructure, be it a container or a VM or the physical appliance itself. And secondly, is there any sort of licensing around VNFDs that, like the descriptors, the network service descriptors and the VNF descriptors? Is there any sort of licensing that would go around them in the case that it is a closed source network function that's being deployed? If Julian's still in the audience, you can rephrase the question if I missed it. Okay, that's it. So I'll take that answer and invite the others to chime in as they see it. Firstly, obviously, whatever network function is being deployed has its own license, and that is not up to OSM to manage. So as far as the actual network function goes, it can be completely proprietary, it can be built from open, it can be almost however we want it to be. When it comes to the descriptors themselves, that's a little bit more interesting because we don't have any field right now in the descriptor, to my knowledge, that would state what sort of license it's covered under. Obviously, anything that we've published in the OSM repository package right now is covered under our general Apache license, but there is no explicit licensing there. Now, if you're working with a vendor, or if you are a vendor and you're seeking to provide a network service descriptor and a VNF descriptor, and you happen to have logic in your operators, in your charms, that you consider to be intellectual property, there is nothing in the OSM licensing that I am aware of that would prevent you from making it available directly to your customer and having them use it in their OSM. So OSM would not prevent you from saying this logic inside the NFV descriptor is proprietary, therefore I am not going to put it on the internet and I am not disclosing it under any sort of open license. However, OSM does nothing to protect you from somebody else viewing it, provided they have access to OSM. So if you're giving the descriptor with this intellectual property inside of it to a telco, a carrier, a whoever to consume, they would be able to open it up and see the contents of it. So generally speaking, it's probably, I would suggest we would probably want to keep intellectual property in the network function and just use public APIs that don't require any intellectual property when designing the network operators, the charms, the network function descriptors. And I will stop rambling and let somebody else add to that if they see fit.
And this is Gerardo. Just one comment, maybe that it could make sense. I assume, or that's at least my thought, that all the descriptors and operation code related to the catalog of VNS and network services in the repos that OSM will maintain or are maintaining will be with Apache 2. Okay. So for other cases, it's as you are mentioning, totally correct. And in our case, everything that we will publish in our repos will be most probably Apache 2, right?
Yes, so I think we should make sure that's clarified in our OSM repository, the public one, that even without an explicit disclaimer, these would be covered by Apache 2. I believe there was one other question that I had flagged as, oh, that would be good for the Q&A, but Gianpietro, you may have covered it right there during the session, and that is, what is the particular difference between reactive and operator framework for charms?
Yeah, I covered the basics, okay. But if we have David, maybe we can get deeper on that answer.
I'm just seeing, Dominic, are you available, or shall we wait for David to?
Sure, I can start explaining. Basically, I think Gianpietro already mentioned it in his previous session, but one of the main advantages of using the operator framework is that you actually are using pure Python, so that allows you to use tooling that is already in Python and not the kind of awkward situation that was happening previously with Reactive, where you were using a Python that was kind of modified with the hook statements and the Reactive framework. So this allows for a lot easier way of debugging, adding external tooling, external modules that already exist in Python, and also use standard modules like standard logging tools and all of that. Also, using an event-driven framework is a lot more intuitive for almost anyone who has been programming for some time, like, for example, any UI interface or stuff like that. Most of them are event-based, so that makes it a lot easier for anyone that has a little bit more programming experience. And also, especially testing is something that now the operator framework is encouraging a lot more, and there is active development for future testing for any kind of charms. And I think that's just some of the benefits for the operator framework. It's just a way of writing cleaner code for charms and best practices. I hope that answers the question more or less.
Another thing that people talk about is that it makes a much clearer mental model of the underlying application model. So, for example, a charm of a database. That database could be serving two different applications at the same time. I mean, that's perfectly normal, right? You install MySQL, you install Postgres, and then you connect two applications to it. That's fine. In Reactive, you'd have to keep that idea in your head all the time. And when you are constructing your keys, to sort of essentially persist information, you'd have to make sure that you got that right, so that in your key structure there was room to have two different apps. And many charmers would get that wrong the first time around, because they were building a charm, to have this database talk to that application. So it was a very simplistic model in it. The operator framework gives you the model structurally in a very sort of obvious Python sort of way. And so it just is much easier to get it right. Whatever applications are connected are listed for you as these are the applications that are connected, right? Those are just objects. So in terms of visually or mentally picturing what's going on, it's structurally much cleaner and leaves much less, it expects much less upfront knowledge from the charmer.
Okay, if there is more that is asked for that, if there's more questions on that, go ahead and paste them. If not, I shall move on to the next question in the list here.
Hi.
Sorry, continue.
Reactive framework, is it not a complete Python-based framework? Operator framework, if we use,
Yeah, the operator framework is in Python and only in Python. We sort of took the decision to say, look, let's see if it gets easier if we pick a language and then go deep on that language. We use the features of that language in the way that's normal for that language. So the operator framework, the Python operator framework, is exactly that. It's a Python operator framework. Juju itself under the hood.
It means like all. Yeah.
Yeah, let me keep going. Juju itself under the hood knows
all
nothing
the
about
Python libraries
languages.
we can use it in operator framework.
Yes, that's correct. You are going to want to think about Python versioning.
Oh.
So you're going to want to
but
be.
In the case, what about in the case of Reactive framework?
Well, so let me tell the underlying story. So Juju itself doesn't know anything about the language of the charms, right? Juju itself is essentially calling binaries in the charm, and it's calling them with a calling convention, so an environment variable. So that's how Juju's interacting with the charm. It's just through executing binaries, like any sort of standard binary plugin mechanism, like CNI, CSI, that sort of thing, right? The reactive, and that was deliberate. We wanted people to write charms in whatever language they wanted to use. What we found was that, so then Reactive tried to preserve that. So with Reactive, we wanted to have a more structured approach, but still be possible to write in different languages. So you can actually do reactive stuff in Bash, you can do reactive stuff in Python. But the problem with that is because you're passing stuff through these layers of binaries calling binaries, you lose a lot of the normal Python it's harder for the Python to be pure Python in a reactive world, right? So you can do Python reactive, but there are all these complications because it's getting called in particular ways and because it's washing things so that people could put bash layers on top of Python layers, right? So with the operator framework, which is sort of the third generation attempt to really make the developer's life clear, we said, let's just focus on Python. So to be clear, you can still make a charm in whatever language you like. You can use Juju as an event mechanism, and you can build that. There are actually community people in the Juju community that are busy making a different charm framework because they're interested in some different ideas, and that's fine. This operator framework is pure Python, and I think the people who've dug into it feel that it's much better. But I would encourage, you know what I mean? I want you to have the full picture in your mind, right? If you have a reason to want to make charms in a different language, you still can, absolutely, you still can. We would recommend that you focus on this operator framework. It's demonstrably better than any other way to create a Kubernetes operator that we've seen, or certainly previous ways to create charms, right? Easier to understand, easier to debug, easier to share code effectively. And as you said, you can use normal Python libraries anywhere, and they should just work.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
I have a question. It's regarding OSM installation part. Is there any way we can download and install this OSM on a machine which don't have any access to the internet? Like I have a lab machines which don't have access to my internet. All that I have is a staging server available with me, which has a perfect internet connection. So can I download all these? Is there any repo or can I download all these stuff on that server, on that staging server, and then install the other machines which don't have internet?
Yes.
So
the installation, I have pasted before the installation method, right? It's in this screen here. Installing OSM.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
sorry, is presenting something different, or you paste?
Yeah, I pasted. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, you have everything there. There are different options. Yeah.
But okay, so in your case, you could use the background installation maybe, where you would build an image that already contains everything in your staging server, and then you can run that in your other servers that do not have internet. That could be a solution for you.
So the other thing that I was going to point out is the repository base. It's something that as we start talking about OSM in production, as we start talking about moving forward in OSM with secure environments where perhaps we aren't going to be downloading directly from the internet, but you've got a mirror of things that are required. We don't have the full end-to-end documented as far as if say a charm needed something and it needed to pull it from the internet. There are ways of specifying like which mirror to use, and you could have that mirror be your documented yet. But as far as the installing OSM goes, not just the vagrant, but you could specify, if you mirrored the Etsy repository, you could specify your local host or your staging host as the Etsy repository from which to draw, or the OSM repository from which to draw. Sorry, if you could scroll back down to the installation options, Gianpetro. There was, keep going. I'm trying to see where other installation options. Nope. Oh, here we go. There it is. -u repo base. So you would be able to mirror the Etsy OSM repository into your staging server, and then specify -u the IP address, HTTP and IP address or host name if that's what you have, and install it that way.
And also you will need to copy that latest Docker images, right?
Also correct, because it will do a Docker pull. So it is something that that I definitely have been thinking about this, because it's definitely something that we want to support, because I can see there being not just a lab case but actual production cases where there are environments where the security policy may just simply be, no, you're never going to go directly to the internet. I am going to host my own repositories, and I will decide when those get refreshed, and I can run security audits on my own repositories. What happened with PHP and PAIR is an example of why somebody would not want to trust an external repository. It's not to say that external repositories are all subject to attack at any time, but the reality of the cyber world and hackers is that they're clever and they're looking for ways to subvert it all the time. And there may very well be environments where somebody says, I'm simply not willing to take the risk regardless of how much I trust you. So we don't have it documented yet. The full end-to-end, that is. General question on VNF onboarding. If I have 5 instances onboarded, is it possible to get the IP addresses of all 5 instances within any of the 1 instances in order to configure a DNS server? This is a use case for configuring DNS. Who would like to take this one?
I will answer with the approach, the simple approach, which is to provide the IP addresses in advance through a parameters file, which is what we kind of did through the Hackfest. We set remember we set through the params file the IP address of the orchestrator. That doesn't mean that the orchestrator has to be pre-configured, or the VMs need to be pre-configured inside the operating system. We are just have the capabilities of providing OpenStack Neutron or Helm or ubundles with information that can be used to dynamic or through the HCP or other assignment or delivery of addressing methods, provide the address, particular address that we want from the pool that they manage. So if we do that, for example, as we did here with the instantiation parameters, and we did here, for example, we did this with Metal LB, we definitely can then use it as a parameter for a charm in the other VNF. So this is the simplest approach, because you are ensuring one IP address in the delivery of address assignment, and you are using it in another function. However, I know there's UU relations support. Not sure if it's fully documented now or not. I guess we are lacking some documentation on that, but that's a mechanism that can give us the opportunity to make network functions speak between each other. Not sure if someone else wants to take that part and provide more details about relations.
We did use the OSM commands in one of the sessions as an example to get the IP address of the UE so that we could VNC to it.
But
so,
that's as a data primitive, for example. But I guess this is a case when you want to automatically grab some addressing from one BNF and use it in the other for some integration in an automated fashion.
Oh,
That's what we see a lot of those kind of requirements. And the way we are tackling this in the BNF onboarding task force is by setting those params in advance. I mean, we are not hard coding anything in the images or in the containers. We're just controlling which IP addresses we want to our services to get.
Yes, I can take that. The relation part. Relations would definitely be one of the ways of being able to synchronize these services with, for example, if the DNS server would be able to be also trumped, and it would be able to have a relation with all the other VNFs. The VNFs could pass their IPs, which could be assigned dynamically during the instantiation process, and that way it could be configured automatically like that. This is currently a feature that is supported in OSM. Due to time limits, we didn't have time to explain it in the Hackfest, but it is something that is documented. It is more or less documented. We have to work still on the documentation, but if you have any detailed questions or something like that, you can also feel free to write in the mailing list or in Slack, and that way we can start documenting it with helping you. So yes, but relations is definitely also another option to automate this process and not having to know the IP addresses before you're even starting the deployment. So yeah, I agree there with Gianpietro.
Okay, next question I see in the list. Is there more documentation about the installation method, such as OSM Kubernetes cluster from an OSM service? Except for the documentation, documentation other than what's in the installation page.
I'm not sure if he means here the OSM installation methods or the kits installation method. I have copied there before some links so that he could take those links and check them.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next question. How do you see the approaches going for achieving Kubernetes platform as a service?
So I'm not trying to understanding the question. If the question is how do we interact with platforms that can provide a cage cluster, that's my assumption. I would say that it was in the, I think that it was in the conversation when we started the feature of cage, and it's something that is not enabled, but as long as there is demand and there is someone that wants also to contribute, it could be a good idea.
Okay.
Does it answer the question, or?
I'm not sure if Sarang is still available. Let me check the participant list. Yes, Sarang, that was your question. Are you, do you have anything further or want to clarify what it is that you were looking for, or did we lose you? Okay, if we want to, if you want to come back to that, please just post it again in the chat, and we'll come back to that. We talked about tag or description about licensing in the catalog. I know we talked all about licensing, but yes, there is a description field that also could be used to add a freeform license, or at least, covered by license, etc. That can be used for licensing. Not going to go back into all of that right now, but yes, the freeform description can be used for that. Okay, now we are getting a little bit meatier. According to ETSI NFVD IFA 011, the lifecycle management scripts are included in the VNFD. But it seems charms used by OSM are not included in the VNFD.
Yeah, so I have answered that question. I think that OSM charms are included in BNF packages. So all LCM operations and day2 operations are in fact part of the BNF package. So from that point of view, we are following the same approach.
Okay.
And then they are referred in the BNFD, so that there's the charm referred here, the charm that you are going to use, and all the primitives in the order and with the parameters. I guess this is the right approach, because we are not filling this descriptor. This is not the place for scripting or things like that.
Yes, so to be clear, yes, the operational code is packaged as part of the overall once you build the VNFD. And I'm not sure if we went through that and you saw the tar GZ being created from it or not, because I did miss some of the sessions this week. But the sources are there, and they do get built in. And when you deliver a VNFD package, the descriptor contains the references to the script to execute, and the source code for it is also in the package. Next question. And I'm not going to take this one because I haven't looked into it, but I think Gerardo may be able to answer. How to rescue a network service instance when it's in an error state such as failed? Are there plans to implement a heal network service method? Or what do we do when an instance remains in a processing status forever? Can we cancel the task?
Thank you. Yeah, I answered also below. So mainly related to the rescue of an NS instance, there is a feature proposal in Gerrit to do a heal or kind of retry. Okay, there have been some internal discussions, but no relevant progress for the moment. Okay, but it's a nice feature, and we are considering to implement it. Okay, related to the NS instances that do not stay in processing status forever, or whether they stay in processing status, in principle they should time out in the end. Okay, so they don't stay in processing status forever. They will time out in the end. So the suggestion is you will wait for that timeout and then delete them. Okay.
Next question. Is it possible to capture the messages transmitted between OSM and the Kates API server? I have tried by configuring an insecure connection on an insecure port and sniffing those packets with Wiresharks, but it seems the messages I want to observe are still hidden, such as onboarding, terminating, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I gave also details to look at. The messages between OSM and the Kates API server should be in the LCM logs, specifically in the N2VC logs, that it's a library that is interacting with UU, for instance, for the charms, and also with the Kubernetes clusters. Okay, so if you check there the logs, and I have put in the chat the link to how to check the logs of any module. Okay, so you could check the logs of LCM, and from there you might be able to see that. I don't know if it's there, but if there is a place, that's the place.
Yeah, Gerardo, in addition to that, I think we're thinking to sniff to see what's the API calls, okay, to the server, to the Kubernetes cluster. It's important to know that we are using Helm, and Helm doesn't use the API from the OSM to the Kubernetes cluster because it uses Tiller. So if you are trying to get the HTTP package for against the API, is something that you couldn't, because it's the communication is via Tiller. And also, well, we have Helm chart and Juju, and it uses the operator, so the communication with the Juju, it's also from OSM to the operator. You will not see the API or the actions over the API directly over the cluster, at least for an OSM.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So I am just scrolling down the list of questions. So if there are answers already in the chat, yeah, Gerardo, that's great that you point that they have been answered there. But next question I see is, could there be a list of what's needed at the start on the Vim side in the onboarding documentation? For example, how to set up a simple Vim like what we have with K8s, OpenStack, or Grafana. It's useful for hardware planning if they know what's needed to install ahead of time.
Does it mean, is it a question about how to prepare a Vim or how to install a Vim? Is that related to that, or?
It's a question from Julian. Is Julian still in the call?
Well, in principle, yes. The documentation of OSM related to the VIMs, the chapter 4 in the documentation, is related to both preparing the VIM itself to be able to be used, for instance, for OSM, and also on how to add it to OSM. Okay, there might be something, okay, there might be missing aspects, but I think that more or less it's there.
Yeah, okay, so I'm beginning to think that as part of this Hackfest, what we might want to do is just sort of see if we can publish a guide that says, this is the environment that we set up for this Hackfest. So an OpenStack with these images loaded, a tenant with the ability to create flavors and launch instances, Kubernetes cluster with a certain amount of information. So I believe that might be what Julian is also asking for there. So I'm just trying to scroll down and see. Yeah, how to prepare the environment that we used this week. So some of it is what Gianpietro is showing right now in terms of preparing your OpenStack. But yeah, it might be useful to have as a follow-on to the Hackfest, to those who attended, just sort of a, here's what we did if you want to replicate it in your environment. I don't know if we'll go to the level of enabling SRIOV, though. I think that may be an exercise for your own environment, because it's very, very specific to our servers. Can OSM work with third-party SOL-compliant VNF-M?
Yeah, I have a question. If he could give an example of a SOL 3 compatible or compliant BNF Manager, it could be great. I have not seen much of them. Maybe Gianpietro, can you comment on that?
Yes, there are some in plug tests testing SOL 3. So there are vendors that just implement the BNF Manager part, and they expect this orchestrator to control them. I would say a short answer is no, because we don't have a predefined clients to interact with using SOL 3. However, nothing prevents you to configure, if you are handling configuration calls through this external BNF Manager, then you can use our regular BNF Manager, our embedded general BNF Manager, that is using primitives, using charms, to code these client calls and orchestrate this configuration. So you would have like a SOL 3 client implemented using charms. However, that would only work if the BNF Manager is delegating the instantiation to the orchestrator. Otherwise, if it expects to handle all the lifecycle, including instantiation, then I think that's not a compatible use case with OSM, because OSM needs to see all to have control of the instantiated instances, unless you would be treating those instances as PNFs, and in that case, I think there's no value.